everybody, I'm Ryan from Ryan Recovers, and today I'm going to be teaching you some distraction techniques for if you are in a crisis or if you're in a low mood, so that you don't use self-destructive coping mechanisms. We're going to replace as many of the self-destructive coping mechanisms as we can during this video. All of the different mechanisms that I use for helping with self-destructive coping mechanisms and with helping with low mood and anxiety come from the Dialectical Behavioural Therapy workbook. I really like this book. It's been really helpful for me, and I have to tell you, when I first went through this book, I didn't find it very helpful, but the second time I went through it again, I didn't find it super helpful, but as soon as I read it with a positive mindset and deciding that this is going to help me, it suddenly did. So it really does matter where your head is at when you decide to do this, so just remember that. So firstly, I'm just going to read you guys the introduction as to what DBT does and who it is for, so you can tell whether this video is going to help you. I think personally, even though it is specifically targeted at those who have things like personality disorders, OCD, and anxiety and depression, I think that it can help anybody who suffers with mental health struggles. And pretty much that is everybody. Like, even if it's just like one bad day, this can still really help you overcome some of those struggles you have on a bad day. It can also help with stress management. I'll just read you guys the introduction so you can decide firstly whether this video is definitely for you. So, Dialectical Behavioural Therapy, developed by Marsha Linehan, hope I'm saying that correctly, in 1993, is extraordinarily effective at helping people manage overwhelming emotions. Research shows that dialectical behavioural therapy strengthens a person's ability to handle distress without losing control or acting destructively. A lot of people struggle with overwhelming emotions. It's as if the knob is turned to maximum volume on much of what they feel. When they get angry, sad, or scared, it shows up as a big, powerful wave that could sweep them off their feet. If you faced overwhelming emotions in your life, you know what we're talking about. There are days when your feelings hit you with the force of a tsunami. And when that happens, it makes you understandably afraid to feel things, because you don't want to get swept away by your emotions. The trouble is, the more you try to suppress or put a lid on your emotions, the more overwhelming they can get. We'll talk about that in chapters 6 and 7 on emotional regulation. What's important to know right now is that trying to stop your feelings doesn't work. There's a fair amount of research to suggest that the likelihood of developing intense, overwhelming emotions may be hardwired from birth, but it can also be greatly affected by trauma or neglect during childhood. Trauma at critical points in our development can literally alter our brain structure in ways that make us more vulnerable to intense negative emotions. However, the fact that our propensity to intense emotions is often rooted in genetics or trauma doesn't mean that the problem can't be overcome. Thousands of people have used the skills you'll learn in this book to achieve better emotional control. They have changed their lives, and you can too. So what are these skills and how will they help you? Dialectical Behavioural Therapy teaches 4 critically important skills that can both reduce the size of emotional waves and help you keep your balance when those emotions can overwhelm you. The first one is distress tolerance. This will help you cope better with painful events by building up your resiliency and giving you new ways to soften the effects of upsetting circumstances. The second one is mindfulness. This will help you experience more fully the present moment while focusing less on painful experiences from the past or frightening possibilities in the future. Mindfulness will also give you tools to overcome habitual negative judgments about yourself and others. The third one is emotional regulation skills, which help you to recognize more clearly what you feel and then to observe each emotion without getting overwhelmed by it. The goal is to modulate your feelings without behaving in reactive, destructive ways. Then the final one is interpersonal effectiveness. This gives you new tools to express your beliefs and needs, set limits, and negotiate solutions to problems, all while protecting your relationships and treating others with respect. This book is structured to make learning easier. Each of the key skills is covered in 2 chapters, basic and advanced, except for mindfulness, which has a third, more advanced chapter. The basic skills chapter teach necessary concepts, identify the components of the new skill, and lead you through initial steps for acquiring the skill. The advanced skills chapters take you through the remaining components of the skill, building level by level. There will be examples to make each step clear, as well as assessments, exercises, and worksheets to help you practice each thing you learn. Then in the final chapter, putting it all together, you'll learn how to integrate all of those skills in order to make them a regular part of your life. The DBT Therapy Skills Workbook is written to make learning easy. The hard part will be making the commitment to do the exercises and put your new skills into practice. Nothing will change just by reading. The words on these pages will have no impact on your life unless you implement behaviourally the new techniques and strategies you will learn here. So now is a good time to think about why you're reading this book or why you're watching this video and what you want to change. So, in the comments, if you want to take part, if you think this is for you, I want you to write down 3 ways you currently react to your emotions that you want to change. So what 3 things can you do when you're upset or overwhelmed that are damaging that you are committed to replace with better ways to cope? For me personally, the ways that I tend to cope are through misusing substances or alcohol, through self-harm, through starving myself, or by recklessly spending money. So those are the things that I am willing to replace with healthy coping mechanisms. So this book has 2 intended audiences. The first are people who are in DBT, either a group or individual, and need a workbook to help learn the 4 key skills. But they also wrote the book so it could be used independently by anyone who struggles with overwhelming feelings. All the tools are here to achieve significant changes in your ability to control emotion. With that said, if you're reading this workbook on your own and are having a hard time implementing the new skills, they strongly recommend seeking the services of a qualified DBT therapist. Then they give you a little bit of hope at the end. Life is hard, you already know that, but you're not stuck or helpless in your struggle with your emotions. You can expect, if you really do the work to implement these skills, that how you react to feelings will change. That's because regardless of genetics or early pain, the key skills you'll learn here can affect the outcome of every conflict and every upset and can literally alter the course of your relationships. There is every reason to hope. All you have to do is turn the page and begin, then keep working at it. So, now you should know whether this video is for you or not. So, if it is, then please continue, and if it's not, then you can continue anyway, or you can leave. But as I said before, I think that this is helpful for anybody with any kind of mental health struggles. So, I really do suggest you stick around. So, in this video, I'm going to be telling you guys exactly what DBT is, and I'm going to run you through each of the chapters one by one, so that you can get a feel for what this series is going to be about. I'm going to make an individual video for each of the topics. We're going to get started by going through basic distress tolerance skills. So firstly, I'm just going to read you what is here about basic distress tolerance skills. Distress tolerance skills, what are they? At some point in our lives, we all have to cope with distress and pain. Either it can be a physical, like a bee sting or a broken arm, or it can be emotional, like sadness or anger. In both cases, the pain is often unavoidable and unpredictable. You can't always anticipate when the bee will sting or when something bad will make you sad. Often, the best you can do is use the coping skills that you have and hope that they will work. But for some people, emotional and physical pain feels more intense and occurs more frequently than it does for other people. Their distress comes on more quickly and feels like an overwhelming tidal wave. Often, these situations feel like they'll never end, and the people experiencing them don't know how to cope with the severity of their pain. For the purposes of this book, we'll call this problem overwhelming emotions. But remember, emotional and physical pain often occur together. People struggling with overwhelming emotions often deal with their pain in a very unhealthy, very unsuccessful way because they don't know what else to do. This is understandable. When a person is in emotional pain, it can be hard to be rational and to think of a good solution. Nevertheless, many of the coping strategies used by people with overwhelming emotions only serve to make their problems worse. So it then gives us a list of common coping strategies used by people dealing with this problem. So in the comments below, again, you can check each of the ones that you use to cope with stressful situations. So firstly, you spend a great deal of time thinking about past pains, mistakes, and problems. You get anxious worrying about possible future pains, mistakes, and problems. You isolate yourself from other people to avoid distressing situations. You make yourself feel numb with alcohol or drugs. You take your feelings out on other people by getting excessively angry at them or trying to control them. You engage in dangerous behaviors such as cutting, hitting, picking at, or burning yourself or pulling out your own hair. You engage in unsafe sexual activities, such as having sex with strangers or having frequent unprotected sex. You avoid dealing with the causes of your problems, such as an abusive or dysfunctional relationship. You use food to punish or control yourself by eating too much, not eating at all, or by throwing up what you do eat. You attempt suicide, or engage in high-risk activities like reckless driving or taking dangerous amounts of alcohol and drugs. You avoid pleasant activities such as social events and exercise, maybe because you don't think that you deserve to feel better. You surrender to your pain and resign yourself to living a miserable and unfulfilling life. All of these strategies are paths to even deeper emotional pain, because even the strategies that offer temporary relief will only cause you more suffering in the future. Use the cost of self-destructive coping strategies worksheet to see how. Note the strategies that you use as well as their costs, and then include any additional costs that you can think of. At the end of the worksheet, feel free to add any of your own strategies that aren't included, as well as their costs. So that will be the first thing that I do in the next video. But for now, we're going to move on to what the second chapter is. Chapter 2 takes us to the next level with advanced distress tolerance skills, otherwise known as improving the moment. In the last chapter, you will have learned many important skills that you can use in a crisis. These skills will distract you from painful situations and then help you soothe yourself and relax so that you can deal with the situation in a more effective way. Remember, your plan for handling a crisis is to distract, relax, and cope. Now that you will have been practicing the distress tolerance skills from the last chapter, you'll be ready for the advanced distress tolerance skills found in this chapter. These techniques will help you feel more empowered when you encounter painful situations in the future, and they'll help you build a more relaxing and fulfilling life for yourself. After trying each technique, mark the ones that are helpful so you can identify them later. So that will be in chapter 2. Which will be the third video in the series. So the third chapter in the book is basic mindfulness skills. So mindfulness skills, what are they? Mindfulness, also known as meditation, is a valuable skill that has been taught for thousands of years in many of the world's religions, including Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, and Islam. Beginning in the 1980s, John Kabat-Zinn began using non-religious mindfulness skills to help hospital patients cope with chronic pain problems. More recently, similar mindfulness techniques were also integrated into other forms of psychotherapy, including DBT. Studies have shown mindfulness skills to be effective at reducing the odds of having another major depressive episode, reducing symptoms of anxiety, reducing chronic pain, decreasing binge eating, increasing tolerance of distressing situations, increasing relaxation, and increasing skills to cope with difficult situations. As a result of findings like these, mindfulness is considered one of the most important core skills in DBT. So what exactly is mindfulness? One definition is offered above by mindfulness researcher John Kabat-Zinn. But for the purpose of this book, mindfulness is the ability to be aware of your thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and actions in the present moment, without judging or criticizing yourself or your experience. Have you ever heard the expressions, be in the moment or be here now? These are both different ways of saying, be mindful of what's happening to you, but this isn't always an easy task. At any moment in time, you might be thinking, feeling, sensing, and doing many different things. For example, consider what's happening to you right now. You're probably sitting somewhere, reading these words, but at the same time you're also breathing, listening to sounds around you, noticing what the book feels like, noticing the weight of your body resting in the chair, and maybe you're even thinking about something else. It's also possible that you're aware of your emotional and physical states of being happy, sad, tired, or excited. Maybe you're even aware of bodily sensations such as your heart beating or the rising and falling of your chest as you breathe. You might even be doing something that you're completely unaware of, like shaking your leg, humming, or resting your head in your hand. That's a lot to be aware of, and right now you're just reading a book, or watching this video in this case. Imagine what's happening to you when you're doing other things in your life, like talking with someone or dealing with people at work. The truth is, no one is 100% mindful all the time, but the more mindful you learn to be, the more control you will gain over your life. But remember, time never stands still, and each second of your life is different. Because of this, it's important that you learn to be aware in each present moment. For example, by the time you finish this sentence, the moment that you started reading it is gone, and your present moment is now different. In fact, you are now different. The cells in your body are constantly dying and being replaced, so physically you're different. Equally important, your thoughts, feelings, sensations, and actions are never exactly the same in every situation, so they're different too. For these reasons, it's important that you learn to be mindful of how your experience changes in each individual moment of your life. And lastly, in order to be fully aware of your experiences in the present moment, it's necessary that you do so without criticizing yourself, your situation, or other people. In DBT, this is called radical acceptance. As described in Chapter 2, radical acceptance means tolerating something without judging it or trying to change it. This is important because if you're judging yourself, your experience, or someone else in the present moment, then you're not really paying attention to what's happening in that moment. For example, many people spend a lot of time worrying about mistakes they've made in the past or worrying about mistakes that they are trying to make in the future. But while they're doing this, their focus is no longer on what's happening to them now. Their thoughts are somewhere else. As a result, they are living in a painful past or future, and life feels very difficult. So to review, mindfulness is the ability to be aware of your thoughts, emotions, physical sensations, and actions in the present moment, without judging or criticizing yourself or your experience. We then go on to chapter 4, which is Advanced Mindfulness Skills. In the previous chapter, you will have learned what mindfulness is, and you also learned the basic what skills of DBT. This means that you learn to become more mindful of what you are focusing on by using methods that, have been in the previous chapter. But in this chapter, you'll be introduced to the more advanced how skills of mindfulness. These skills will help you learn how to be both mindful and non-judgmental in your daily experiences. You will learn 5 how skills: how to use wise mind, how to use practical acceptance to acknowledge your daily experiences without judging them, how to do what's effective, how to create a mindfulness regimen for yourself in order to live your life in a more aware, focused way, and how to overcome the hindrances of your mindfulness practice. As in the last chapter, it is important that you do the exercises in the chapter in the order that they're presented. Each of the exercises builds on the one before it. So we then move on to chapter 5, which is exploring mindfulness further. The mindfulness skills that are at the core of the Dialectical Behavioural Therapy approach are actually linked directly to a much larger and more ancient tradition of meditation. In that larger tradition is a significant body of experience and wisdom related to developing and practicing mindfulness. This experience and wisdom has much to offer anyone interested in mindfulness, whether they seek improved psychological or physical health, personal enrichment, or even spiritual growth. This chapter invites you to explore mindfulness further by trying some additional practices adapted from the ancient tradition of meditation, and now appearing in many clinical settings that teach mindfulness-based approaches for a variety of health-related conditions. The intention and hope is that you will develop an even deeper appreciation for the power of mindfulness to support you, promote your happiness, and lead you increasingly to the rest in wise mind. Marshall Linhan, who developed DBT, has noted this larger context for mindfulness in commenting that the mindfulness skills central to DBT are psychological and behavioral versions of meditation practices from Eastern spiritual training. Linhan goes on to say that in developing DBT, I have drawn most heavily from the practice of Zen, but the skills are compatible with most Western contemplative and Eastern meditation practices. In the past 25 years or so, many healthcare professionals have become interested in mindfulness and its applications in treating a wide variety of health-related conditions, ranging from stress to chronic pain to anxiety and depression to cancer. In bringing mindfulness forward in Western healthcare settings, the ancient teachings of wisdom and of various contemplative and meditative traditions have provided much valuable insight. Although many, like Linhan, have drawn upon these older traditions for guidance, the actual practices used for purposes of health and healing do not require adherence to any specific faith or religious beliefs, nor do they carry any specific cultural requirements. The practice of mindfulness is truly something for all human beings. The practices you will find in this chapter also apply equally to any interested person. First, you will learn about the role of heartful qualities of kindness and compassion, and how they are actually embedded attitudes into any activity of mindfulness. Next, you will learn how mindfulness can deepen breath by breath in the present moment, by attention to and the support of the dimensions and spaciousness and stillness. Kindness, compassion, spaciousness, and stillness. This chapter invites you to bring attention more consciously to those qualities and discover their power to support and deepen your practice of mindfulness. In chapter 6, we will then go on to basic emotional regulation skills. To put it simply, emotions are signals within your body that tell you what's happening. When something pleasurable is happening to you, you feel good. When something distressing is happening to you, you feel bad. In many ways, your emotions are like an instant news service that gives you constant updates about what you're doing and what you're experiencing. Your initial reactions to what is happening to you are called primary emotions. These are strong feelings that come on quickly, that don't involve having to think about what's happening. For example, if you won a contest, you might instantly feel surprised. When someone you care about dies, you quickly feel sad. When someone does something that offends you, you might immediately feel angry. But in addition to experiencing primary emotions, it's also possible to experience secondary emotions. These are emotional reactions to your primary emotions, or to put it another way, secondary emotions are feelings about your feelings. Here's a simple example. Eric yelled at his sister because she did something that made him feel angry. His feeling of anger came on very quickly, but a little later he felt guilty about getting so angry with her. Anger was his primary emotion, and guilt was his secondary emotion. However, it is possible that you can experience numerous secondary emotions in response to a single primary emotion. Here's a more complicated example. Shauna became anxious when she was asked to make a future presentation at work. As the days drew closer, she became depressed as she thought about how anxious she was getting. And then she started to feel worthless that she couldn't make a simple presentation. Then the day after the presentation, she started to feel guilty that she had to make such a big deal about it in the first place. You can see how a person's emotions can get very complicated very quickly. Anxiety was Shauna's primary emotion, and depression, worthlessness, and guilt were all her secondary emotions in response to her anxiety. It's possible that your primary emotional reaction to a sensitive situation can set off a limitless chain reaction of distressing secondary emotions that cause you much more pain than your original emotion does. For this reason, it's important that you try to identify what your original primary emotion is in a distressing situation so that you can learn to cope with that feeling before the avalanche of secondary emotions overwhelm you. This is where emotion regulation skills can be helpful. Emotion regulation skills are important part of DBT because they help you cope with your distressing primary and secondary feelings in new, healthier ways. These skills are especially useful because without them, people often choose to deal with their primary and secondary emotions in ways that only cause them more suffering. In Shauna's example, it's easy to imagine that she could have chosen to use alcohol or drugs to deal with her feelings of anxiety, cutting or self-mutilation to deal with her feelings of depression, and binge eating to deal with her feelings of guilt. These are all harmful coping strategies that are often used by people with overwhelming emotions. For this reason, it's extremely important that you learn emotional regulation skills in this workbook so that you can cope with your primary and secondary emotions in healthier ways and avoid prolonged suffering that often accompany them. Emotion regulation skills are also important for dealing with another problem called ambivalence. Ambivalence occurs when you have more than one emotional reaction to the same event, and each emotion pulls you in a different direction or makes you do something different. For example, Tina had grown up with her father in her life. Then one day, when she was 25, her father contacted her and wanted to see her. Tina felt excited about her opportunity of forming a new relationship with him, but she was equally angry with him for abandoning her family. Clearly, Tina's emotions were split, and she pulled her in two different directions about what to do. If you've been dealing with overwhelming emotions for a long time, it's easy to understand that you might feel frustrated and hopeless about controlling your emotional reactions. But remember, although it might be difficult to control your primary emotional reaction, there's still hope that you can learn to control your secondary emotional responses as well as how you choose to cope with your emotions. And it could be later on when you start using all the skills in this workbook, especially the mindfulness skills, that you might even gain some control over your primary emotional responses too. So how do the emotions work? Emotions are electrical and chemical signals in your body that alert you to what is happening. These signals often begin with your senses of sight, touch, hearing, smell, and taste. Then the signals travel to your brain, where they are processed in an area called the limbic system, which specializes in observing and processing emotions so that you can respond to emotional situations. The limbic system is also connected to the rest of your brain and body, so that it can tell your body what to do in response to an emotional situation. Your emotions are extremely important for many reasons, especially for your survival. Here's an example. Louise was walking down Main Street when suddenly a very large and angry dog began barking viciously and running toward her. In that instant, an emotional signal was sent from her eyes and ears to her brain. Her limbic system had then been processed the information without Louise having to think about what to do. This type of response is called fight or flight, and is determined if Louise was going to fight the dog or run away. Wisely, she chose to run away, and she escaped without being harmed. Her emotions helped her survive and avoid any pain. Now, let's suppose that 2 weeks later she was once again walking through town when she started to turn down Main Street. Very quickly, she began to feel afraid. This is called conditioned response. Louise's limbic system was trying to protect her by helping her remember the dangerous dog on Main Street. Sensibly, she chose to walk down a different street to avoid the dog. In this example, Louise's emotions initially helped her escape danger and pain, and later they also helped her avoid potential harm. Here's another example of how emotions work. Sheila was walking through town when suddenly she saw Courtney, a good friend from many years before. Immediately, Sheila felt happy. When Courtney saw Sheila, she smiled straight away. Sheila noticed her smile and thought, she must be happy to see me too, so Sheila smiled as well. The two women quickly reconnected and made plans to do something in the near future. The encounter made both women feel happy that they had met accidentally after so many years. In this example, the smile was an act of communication for both women. It helped each person recognize how the other person was feeling. If Courtney had frowned and looked the other way when she saw Sheila, Sheila would have recognized the expression as one of disgust and would have probably avoided contact with her. Every person, no matter what their culture, has the ability to express emotions in the same way and to recognize emotional expressions in other people. A smile is a smile, no matter where you are born. These are just two very simple examples, but you can see what emotions serve many purposes. Emotions are signals that help you do the following: survive, fight or flight, remember people and situations, cope with situations in your daily life, communicate with others, avoid pain, and seek pleasure. So what are emotional regulation skills? As you've already learned, emotion regulation skills will help you cope with your reactions to your primary and secondary emotions in new and more effective ways. Remember, you can't always control what you feel, but you can control how you react to those feelings. These are some of the most important techniques to learn in DBT, so you might not be surprised that you've already been practicing some of them in the chapters on distress tolerance and mindfulness skills. The 4 skill groups in DBT, distress tolerance, mindfulness, emotional regulation, and interpersonal effectiveness, overlap and reinforce each other because this helps you learn the skills more easily and to remember them more quickly. In DBT, there are 9 emotion regulation skills that will help you gain control of your emotions and the behaviors associated with them. These skills are as follows: 1. Recognizing your emotions. 2. Overcoming barriers to healthy emotions. 3. Reducing your physical vulnerability. 4. Reducing your cognitive vulnerability. 5. Increasing the positive emotions. 6. Being mindfulness of your emotions without judgment. 7. Emotion exposure. 8. Doing the opposite of your emotional urges. And 9. Problem solving. This chapter focuses on the first 5 emotion regulation skills, and the next chapter will cover the last 4 skills. As in the previous chapters, the exercises in these 2 chapters will build on each other, so make sure you do the exercises in order. Chapter 7 then focuses on advanced emotion regulation skills. In this chapter, you will learn 4 advanced emotion regulation skills. 1. Being mindful of your emotions without judgment. 2. Emotion exposure. 3. Doing the opposite of your emotional urges. And 4. Problem solving. In Chapter 3, Basic Mindfulness Skills, you will have learned how to recognize and describe your emotions. Now in this chapter, emotion exposure will further help you practice 2 very important things. First, you will learn how to observe the natural life cycles of your emotions, watching them rise and fall, shift and change as new emotions replace old ones. Second, you'll learn that you can endure, without avoidance or resistance, your strong feelings. You'll get practice staying in the emotion even though you want to run or turn the feelings into action. Emotion exposure is a crucial process for learning not to fear your feelings, and it will strengthen your emotion regulation skills. The more you practice this exposure work, the more confident you'll become as you face tough emotional challenges. In addition to being mindful of your emotions without judgment and emotion exposure, you'll learn a behavioural technique called doing the opposite of your emotional urges. When you have a strong emotion, it affects your behaviour in 2 ways. First, you change your facial expression and body language to reflect your feeling. If you're angry, you may begin to scowl and tighten your fists. On the other hand, if you're scared, your eyes may open wide while you hunch your shoulders. The second behavioural change comes from action urges that accompany every emotion. Anger, for example, may produce urges to shout or hit, while fear might push you to cower or back away. Doing the opposite of your emotional urges is a strategy that blocks ineffective emotion-driven responses while often helping you to soften the feeling itself. The next step will be learning key behavior analysis and problem-solving skills to deal more effectively with high emotion situations. You'll identify what prompts the emotion and learn how to develop alternate strategies to cope with emotion-triggering events. The last thing we'll do in this chapter is introduce you to an exercise regime called the weekly regulator. It will help you to keep practicing the key emotion regulation skills you've learned here. Learning to be mindful of your emotions without judging them decreases the chance that they will grow in intensity and become even more painful. Chapter 8 focuses on basic interpersonal effectiveness skills. Interpersonal effectiveness skills are a composite of social skills training, assertiveness training, and listening skills, which have been combined by Linhan for DBT. In addition, we've added negotiation skills to complete the program. Relationships are precious and they're vulnerable. They bring love, companionship, and support. Yet sometimes in a matter of moments they can become broken beyond compare. Keeping your relationships healthy and alive requires interpersonal skills that you can learn in this chapter and the next. The most necessary and important of these skills is assertiveness, which is the ability to 1. Ask for what you want, 2. Say no, and 3. Negotiate conflict without damaging the relationship. Before learning assertiveness, however, there are some key things you need to know. Mindful attention. Relationships require attention, whether it's a lover, friend, co-worker, or merely a carpool companion. Maintaining a good relationship depends on noticing the other person's feelings and reactions and then watching the process between you. Using the mindfulness skills you practice in chapters 3 through 5, you can observe facial expression, body language, tone of voice, and choice of words during a conversation to get a fix on the mood and state of the relationship. Paying attention means staying in the here and now, not thinking about what you want to say next or focusing on some memory. It means remaining present to what you see, hear, and sense emotionally, in the same way that you can breathe, walk, or even do the dishes mindfully. You can also relate with full awareness to the present moment. When you pay attention, you notice trouble coming before it overwhelms you. You also gain time to ask clarifying questions that can help you correct misconceptions. Not paying attention, focusing away from the moment between you and others, has a very heavy price. You'll end up doing one or more of the following: missing vital cues about the other person's needs and reactions, projecting inaccurately your fears and feelings on the other, or blowing up and running away when you're surprised by a negative response you could have seen coming. Mindful attention also improves watching your own experience in relation to others. Do you need to change something from the other person? Do you need to change the process between you? Do you have feelings that signal something important about what's going on? Noticing your feelings can help you figure out what you need to change in a relationship before you blow up or run away. Chapter 9 focuses on advanced interpersonal effectiveness skills. This chapter contains all the applied skills for interpersonal effectiveness. Learning and practicing these skills will change your life because you'll have far less conflict and far more rewards in your relationships. Your connections to people will feel different, more satisfying than frustrating, and more supportive than depriving. In this chapter, you'll learn the following specific skills: knowing what you want, modulating intensity, making a simple request, making basic assertiveness scripts, using assertive listening skills, saying no, coping with resistance and conflict, negotiating, and analysing problem interactions. In the final chapter and the final video of this series, we will be putting it all together. The skills you have learned in this book will grow stronger each day that you practice them. Conversely, if your skills aren't used, they'll slip further from your grasp. They'll cease to be real choices, real ways to change. Instead, they'll become more ideas vaguely recalled with no power to help you. Keeping and strengthening your skills will take sustained effort. There's an old saying that victory belongs to those most persevering, which is exactly what you need now. A commitment to practice your skills daily over time. You may wonder legitimately where you'll find the motivation to keep doing something so challenging, and all this talk of perseverance may sound very 19th century and preachy, but there is a way to practice daily what you've learned, and it doesn't take a huge amount of willpower. What it requires is getting in the habit of spending about 15 minutes a day practicing your skills. So that is everything that you need to know about dialectical behavioural therapy. If you do decide that this is for you, then I'm going to have a video posted every week on different techniques that you can use. So yeah, if you are interested in that, then please stick around, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye guys!